Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast by Scott McDonald and DrDemographics.com, the best source of demographic, psychographic, and marketing information for professionals.
So with this in mind, we can assume that there are several good sites that are showing potential growth and that will be profitable for you to consider to either purchase or to start up a practice. I am not really making a differentiation between what is a good site and what is not a good site, nor in terms of what type of practice would work best in which location. Let's just kind of keep it general for now. Now, the author and demographer Randall O'Toole of New Geography magazine does a wonderful synopsis of what parts of the U.S. are growing and what parts are not, and even why. Now, between 2021 and 2022, the populations of California, Illinois, and New York all declined by more than 100,000 people each, according to estimates released a few weeks ago by the U.S. Census Bureau. Also, Illinois, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia all lost more than 10,000 residents, with 11 other states also declining on population. Now, the percentage change is what is scaring demographers, not the total number lost, but rather the percentage of the whole. These facts are just that, facts, but should not be considered a sign of doom that there is a decline in population in some of the states or that decline is happening in some parts. It is not unusual for some places not to grow or to shrink at roughly the same percentages. So let's kind of look a little bit beneath the numbers together. He said, the nation as a whole grew 1.26 million people, but clearly that gain was not evenly distributed. Instead, Texas grew by 470,000 residents, Florida by 416,000, North Carolina by 133,000, Georgia by 125,000, Arizona by 94,000, South Carolina by 89,000, and Tennessee by 83,000. All of these numbers are rounded to the nearest 1,000. Now, percentage-wise, the fastest growing states were Florida, Idaho, South Carolina, Texas, South Dakota, and Montana. Arizona, Delaware, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Utah all grew by more than 1%. I should mention growth at greater than 1% is a very good sign, but it's only proportional growth. It's not in raw numbers. Now, this is important. The biggest losers were New York, Illinois, Louisiana, and West Virginia, Hawaii, and Oregon. Now, I can look at each of those states and explain to you why each state lost population, especially Hawaii, for example. Being an island, it has different rules, and they're being significant. Oregon has suffered a crime spike, and that is accounting for its shrinkage. West Virginia is poor, and many people are considering that is not a good place to go and make their fortune. Now, here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. Los Angeles County lost more than 90,000 residents, more than any other county. This is followed by Cook County, Illinois, which lost 68,000. Queens, which is Brooklyn area, and the Bronx all lost 40 to 50,000, and Richmond County, which is Stanton now, lost 2,000. But surprisingly, New York, and I mean in New York City, Manhattan, grew 117,000. Other counties that lost a lot of residents include Philadelphia, Wayne, Santa Clara, and Alameda. Allegheny is Pittsburgh, Cuyahoga, which is Cleveland, and Multnomah, which the Portland counties, all lost more than 10,000 people. Now, once again, it's not the raw numbers that are significant, but rather the percentage of people that were lost in these areas that we have to keep control of. Now, Wayne County is very poor. Santa Clara, which is the same size, is very rich. That's Silicon Valley. So if you look at a place to go, you'd say, well, you know, Santa Clara has about the same size as Wayne County. Why not go there? The price of the practices are significantly different, and the potential for growth and wealth is also very different. For the most part, you want counties that are showing the middle range of income in the houses, in property values, in personal income. So in this particular case, we would look at Cuyahoga County as being one of the best options to go to. We would also look at Portland as being a bad place to go, even though it didn't seem to lose as many people. That it lost population were primarily related to crime and lack of employment, and that is troubling, particularly if you're trying to find a place that is going to give you a good return on your practice investment. It is better to have a practice in a growing area, or is it better, or one that is shrinking? Well, obviously you want to go to the places that are growing. Growing areas are likely to have improved competition ratios, but not every location can have an equal competition ratio or similar demographic characteristics. There is likely to be a trade-off. So it may be growing in terms of numbers, but the economy is not looking so good. Now, for example, New York City has a remarkably favorable demographic character, as demonstrated by its reimbursement rates. It's far superior. So people feel free to invest in practices in New York City and count on the fact that it's going to become more affluent over time. Measuring the relative benefits by measuring the demographic character versus the increase in the demographic size, or the competition ratio, is not easy and it's not simple. We still have to work out the costs of square footage property of office space and other location variables. This is what we mean by the practice site viability. Still, this is relatively easy and why we have to discuss it when we start our research. That is why we're calculating relative desirability of the location, not a number that is absolutely true in every case. Now, Maricopa County, which is Phoenix, gained 57,000 residents. Harris County, Houston, gained 46,000. Collin County, which is part of the Dallas metro area, gained 44, and Denton County, part of the Dallas metro, gained 33,000. You may assume several things because of these numbers. Most other counties saw big gains, and these were in Florida, North Carolina, Texas, but Riverside County in Southern California grew by close to 21,000 people. Now, there are 5 major mega counties in Southern California. Riverside County is one of them. The reason people like to look at Riverside County is because housing is relatively inexpensive compared to, say, Los Angeles County. And it is likely to increase even further in raw numbers and in percentage. But keep in mind that numbers are only estimates and not everyone agrees with them. For example, the Portland State University Population Research Center estimates that Oregon gained 15,000 residents in 2022, while the Census Bureau says it lost 16,000. The reason there's a big difference, and the reason you should be aware of the significance of these numbers, is that very often the housing prices are lower and therefore they're more desirable. Where there is a lower housing price, people pay out of pocket for a house, will be highly motivational to those people and make these increases more solid. Housing prices influence population changes, but they're clearly not the only factor, as housing is very affordable in Louisiana and West Virginia. Louisiana and West Virginia's great virtues are not employment nor income, but rather how expensive or inexpensive housing is. Density may play at least much of the role as housing prices. Though Manhattan grew by 17,000, this was after losing 81,000 between 2020 and 2021. So the 17,000 were just filling in vacant spaces left by people fleeing the city during the pandemic. But without the pandemic, will Manhattan continue to do as well? I posit that it will not. In general, people move from places they didn't like, whether due to high prices, density, or other factors, to go to places they liked. What has changed from the past is that job locations are less relevant than they were before. People are able to get a job outside of their small town or their market that they couldn't before. People are working out of town and living in housing that is more affordable to them, and therefore they're happier. They like the place that they're living better. Now, what demographic character is really telling us? But what I'm saying by character, by the way, is I'm saying aspects about the community really can be important for you to judge. It is worrisome when real estate prices rise or fall suddenly, not that they rise or fall at all. If a recession comes, as many predict will, the economy and predictions of the future, we hear, are going to make sane predictions impossible to make, especially for foreign investors. And many of the investors in the United States real estate, primarily residential, are taking their cues from what they hear in the media. It's no laughing matter either. Wars are started over this kind of thing. When predictions and results do not match up, people are unhappy. Does all this really matter? Well, maybe more than we think. This is especially true in the field of healthcare practices. When there is a glut of doctors who focus on non-English speakers, when it gets desperate for patients or cash, the system breaks down. People like to have predictable numbers in a market, especially where they're paying as much money as they are for a healthcare practice. Insurance claims cannot be processed, for example. People start bartering for services which may sound terrific at first, but is inherently unstable eventually. In short, experts are saying that practices that are located near new populations of hardworking, middle-class immigrants may be your best bet to get a good return on your practice investment. If you're familiar with their language and culture, well, so much the better. People are sometimes ignorant of the fact that people have their own expectations of what is big profit. That's what I'm saying. Now, growth potential. I cannot say what locations hold the most potential for every doctor and every practice in the country. There are too many variables to consider. But looking at the universe of options with the lowest risk and the highest potential for return on your investment would be wise to think outside the box. Immigrant populations are likely to be economically stable, growing, and tied to suburban settings. For most practices, that's a very good thing. It means the sustained growth and outside investments in those properties will be good and easier to measure. Many can be found in places where home ownership is high and the population is rising in size and number, but not necessarily in demographic character. In short, they have a relatively high birth rate, lots of kids coming. For most practices, that is a high or a good reason to invest in the area. Now, we also see crime as diminishing in many of the places I've mentioned. The new residents in these locations take great pride in the place where they live. With that in mind, they are likely to make the proper investments in keeping their property desirable. Now, I have two reports that I think you should consider. One is the Practice Viability Report, which talks about relative risk and worth of properties. We also have the Marketing Report, which looks at the demographic character of the population and a great deal of the ethnicity and lifestyle choices of the people who are in that area. You can get a free sample of them at drdemographics.com in the drop-down menu. We list all prices on those as well, so you know how much it's going to cost you. But ultimately, the idea is to get research that will back up the decisions that you need to make. You can go and find these at drdemographics.com, or if you want to talk about the background on this, you can always go to 800-849-0499 and talk to Mike or some of our other people. Now, ultimately, you need facts. You've got to get them on your side. You have to know how much risk you have. What a lot of demographers do is they will publish the numbers, but they won't publish what these numbers will relate to and help you to answer what you need to know. Mike Green and others at Dr. Demographics are just outstanding in helping to identify the significance of these numbers. I want to thank you for your time and for listening to this little presentation. Take care.